This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good night, Shabbos. Rabbi says we prepare for Shabbos, Parshas Korach. We know the episode of Korach and Moshe Rabbeinu, one of the quintessential machloikesin, or the quintessential machloikes. It's even held up in the Mishnah as an example of a machloikes which will not be niskayim. Says the Mishnah in Perkei Avos and Parakeh, Mishnah Beis. Kol machloikes shehi l'shem shamayim soifel l'hiskayim v'sheina l'shem shamayim ein soifel l'hiskayim. A machloikes which is for the sake of heaven will endure. A machloikes which is not l'shem shamayim will not endure. Ezo hi machloikes shehi l'shem shamayim zoi machloikes hilo v'shamay v'sheina l'shem shamayim zoi machloikes Korach. And the Malbim in the beginning of this week's Parsha is bothered by the lack of symmetry in the Mishnah, because when it talks about Korach, Hillel and Shammai, it gives you both parties, Hillel and Shammai, it gives you both teams. So when it talks about Korach v'Adosai, the only thing it doesn't give you the other side. Who's the other side? Who are they arguing with? What's going on over here? Well, it says the Malbim, this is the key to understanding the opening psukim in this week's Parsha. For example, when you vayikohalu al Moshe v'al Aaron, they gathered. They gathered? What do you mean they gathered? We know who it says. There's Korach, there's Aviram. What is the word vayikohalu coming to add? Well, it says the Malbim as follows. Vayikach Korach hine amru chazal ba'avos kol machlokas shehi l'shem shamayim soiv l'skayim u'chamagas shenim l'shem shamayim ein soiv l'skayim. Frek the Malbim hoyoroi loymar zu machlokes Korach u'Moshe kamasher kasav zu machlokes hil v'shamay. Ulam chazal amdunu shemachlokes shehi l'shem shamayim. Chazal are teaching you that a machlokes l'shem shamayim is fundamentally different than a machlokes she'eino l'shem shamayim in the following way: that a machlokes which is l'shem shamayim, there are two parties. A machlokes that's not l'shem shamayim, listen carefully. Ulam chazal lamdunu shemachlokes shehi l'shem shamayim kol kat mishnei tzadei hacholkim misachedes ba'atzma ki kulam mischaven l'tachlis achas l'shem shamayim. When you have machlokes that's l'shem shamayim, both parties, each party is unified, because each party has a cause. Ulam machlokes she'eino l'shem shamayim, machlokes which is not for the sake of heaven. Rak mibnei avas hakavod v'avas atzmai. Machlokes which is not l'shem shamayim, what is the purpose of it? Personal benefit. Oz yesh machlokes v'nigud gam beinu anoshim shezachtu lamay b'tzad echad. A machlokes which is not l'shem shamayim, there's no unity even on the side of the fight. In other words, you have a machlokes l'shem shamayim, Beis Shammai is unified in their position, Beis Hillel is unified in their position. Machlokes she'eino l'shem shamayim, for example, Korach v'Adosai, they themselves can't get it together. Why? Because if a certain side is in it for their own personal benefit, so you have Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Yisachar, Zevulun. Reuven wants what's in it for him. Shimon wants what's in it for him. And what's in it for Reuven might be completely antithetical to Shimon. And what Shimon wants could be completely antithetical to Reuven. For example, as follows. Ki kol echa me'adar ra'azos. Ki kol echa min ha'yechidim mechaven to'elas atzmai u'misnaged lekavanas chaveroi. He is opposing the kavanah of their friend. Shu gam kein mechavein toyelas atzmai. Ka'inyan shahaya machlokes gam bein Korach v'Adosai. Ki kol echad meha'eda hara azoi siskavein kavanah acheres misnagedes lezulasai. Each one had his intended purpose. Sheinei Korach ratza b'kahuna gedola. What did Korach want? He wanted to be Kohen Gadol. Rashi says that he wanted the Nasios. That Moshe got Kahuna Gedola and Elitzaphan ben Uziel, who was the fourth son of who? Uziel was the son of who? Of Kahas. Yeah? Wanted the Nesios Parshas. Right. So the Malbim points out Shinei Korach Rotz B'Kehuna Gedola. Shemash Kosav Shehiskani Al Nesiusa Shalitzafa and Perish Shezeh Oiro Selachaka Moshe. That the misgiving of the Nesios from Elitzafan, he wanted it to go to Korach. That was just an excuse. Aval Achar Shenichnas B'Riv Hayimachlukas Al Kunas Aron Shaladaitoi Achar Sha'Amram. Amram was the Bechar of Kahas. Achar Sha'Amram Shua Bechar Lekas Nata Chelka B'Masha Moshe Yamelech. Moshe was the king. Roy Shakunag Dotinasin Leben Yitzhar. Kahas. It should go to the son of Yitzhar, who's the second son of Kahas. So Amram, Yitzhar, Chevron, Uziel. So Korach, yeah, he had a taina about the Nesios, but Be'ikr, he wanted Kahuna Gedola. Once Amram took Malucha to his family, so he wanted Kahuna Gedola to go to his family. Amna Machloikes Dasan Ma'aviram V'oin Ben Pelas. What does Dasan Ma'aviram got to do with it? They didn't like the fact that the Bechor was taken from Ruvain. So every guy here has his own geschäft. Korach wants the Kahuna Gedola. Dasan Ma'aviram, Bechlal, their Baroiga is about the fact that the Kahuna was taken away from Ruvain. Now, think the Bechor was taken away. So think about it. Lefi Dasan Ma'aviram. Should Korach be the Kohen Gadol? Avada not. Korach's not the Bechor. Kahuna Gedola should go to them. He says, "Shalpi Masher Ruvain HaBechor Rosh Teitz Men HaMelucha VeHaKahuna." Dasan Ma'aviram maintained. What did Yaakov Avinu tell Ruvain? Ruvain, Chariyata, Yeser Se'es, Yeser Az. You could have been Kohen Gadol, and you could have been Melech. Chumash goes Ruvain, Chariyata, Yeser Az. Shese'es Yakahuna, V'oisu Amelucha. V'isloinu Shenasna Kahuna V'aved Hashem L'Shevet Levi. What are you giving Kahuna to Shevet Levi? Melucha you're giving to Yehuda. Dasan Ma'aviram said we should be Sai the Melech and Sai the Kohen Gadol. V'hamelucha v'ekdima v'degolim Yehuda. And Yehuda went first in the Degolim. V'gam al shenasna b'chor Yosef. They lost everything. Bechor went to Yosef. Melucha went to Yehuda. And Kahuna went to Levi. So Dasan Ma'aviram and Korach, if they would have been in a dark alley, they would have punched each other in the face. V'zeh shekosa v'yikach Korach. Rabbi say Anub Shat. Vayikach Korach. You ever hear those words? Vayikach Korach. You got up to that part of the Parsha? Vayikach Korach?
That's one.
Yeah.
That part, yeah.
So all the Mefarshim struggle. What did he take? So Rashi says he took himself. We asked on Wednesday, Tosfos says in Kedushin, the one thing you can't take is yourself. No, you know, right? You can't. One thing you can't take is you can't take yourself. Says the Malbim, there's one thing we find in Tanakh. Kechu Imachem Devarim. You could take an argument. You could take, in other words, an argument. When I say an argument, I don't mean a fight. An argument is a taina. Kechu Imachem Devarim. Vayikach Korach. Korach advanced the following argument. You know what his argument was? Vayikach Korach. What was his argument? His argument was Ben Kahas, Ben Yitzhar, Ben Kahas, Ben Levi. That was his argument. Vayikach Korach. Korach advanced the following, and that is, namely, Ben Yitzhar, Ben Kahas, Ben Levi. That was his argument. He said, let's check the pedigree here. I'm Ben Yitzhar, Ben Kahas. I'm number 2. So Moshe, you took the Malchus. I'm Kohen Gadol. You know, not Vayikach Korach. And now we're identifying. By the way, you know who Korach is? We know exactly who Korach is. We don't need Parshas. This is not the Parsha of Yuchsin. Vayikach Korach. Korach advanced the following argument. The argument is Ben Yitzhar, Ben Kahas, Ben Levi. Ki chazu says man hainu kichas devarim the tainos kamay kachui machem devarim shekarach lakach loy tainos machlakusay, which is Ben Yitzhar, Ben Kahas, Ben Levi. Since Yitzhar is second to Kahas, he should be the Kohen Gadol. V'dasan v'aviram b'nei Eliyav v'oim ben Peles b'nei Ruvain. Again, why are we telling me B'nai Ruvain? We know they're B'nai Ruvain. No! Dasan v'aviram, they took their argument. You know what their argument was? B'nai Ruvain. We should be Sai the Kohen, Sai the Melech, Sai the Kahuna Gedola. Him lakchu Tanos el machalkusam unei shehim unei Ruvain. Shechachru shekuna v'alviyah magiel l'shevet Ruvain. Shuha b'char liYaakov. So now each guy has their own geschäft. They're not in agreement. In other words, let's say Korach and Dasan Aviram would have had a fight. Korach would have said, I should be Kohen Gadol. Dasan Aviram said, you should be cleaning the floors in the shul. We should be Sai the Melech, the Kohen Gadol. They argued on each other. They didn't agree with each other. They were mortal enemies. V'haraya, v'yikach Korach, Korach's taina was ben Yitzhak ben Gaz ben Levi. And Dasan Aviram's taina was ben Ruvain. So what did they do? Now we're not finished with these chavra. Vayakumu l'fnei Moshe. Now the 250 guys. And what did they take? V'malakhu heim l'tainos. Heim tanu nesiye eda kriye moyed. There were nesiyim. V'hislenu al she'asa Moshe kol ze b'lei daita ma'atzasim kamoylach mamlacha bilti mugbelas u'machalik soros u'mnuyim kecheftzai. Their taina was, why are we nesiyim? Because Moshe made us Nasiim. Why didn't he ask us if we wanted to be Nasiim? You're now the mayor of New York City.
What's wrong with that?
What's wrong with it? I'll let you know if I want to take the job. Nothing wrong with it. Here, you're the president, you're the vice president. Who said I want to be vice president? Maybe I want to be the mayor. I don't know. You don't impose on me. Now, Moshe Rabbeinu, you're acting like a king who just administers appointments without any at will. Don't you need to ask advice? V'gam yishloimar, you could say, says the Malbim, shehem ratzu shekahuna tinasan l'nasiyei ha'eda. They also wanted to be kohanim. They felt, one second, you're telling me that who are kohanim? Everybody who's born from Levi. Oh, right, that's a great merit system. Anyone whose great grandfather was Levi. I didn't know that positions in Klal Yisrael are based on complete nepotism and what family you're born into. Why don't we make a merit system? Maybe the people who actually earn their place should deserve it. Nesiim, who are an appointment of merit, not that it should be given to one complete shevet. Shiur b'Yerusha membli habed al mailas hakohanim v'shleimusam. V'gam yishloimar, like the Ibn Ezra says, that these 250 guys were all b'chayrim, and they wanted the kahuna. Vayikahalu, and they all gathered. Says Malbim, the meaning of that is Ratzalaimar hinei lefizeh kol adas Korach hayu misnagdim zelazeh. They all couldn't stand each other. They hated each other's guts. Not only did they feel the Korach should not be Kohen Gadol, they held the whole Shevet Levi was wrong. In other words, Dasan Aviram by the Bnei Levi, when they went back home, they had a target in their house with the darts. On it was not Moshe Rabbeinu, it was Dasan Aviram. It was Dasan Aviram. Dasan Aviram, they couldn't stand Dasan Aviram's God. Dasan couldn't stand Korach's God. Moshe Rabbeinu had no problems with anybody. He went at home and he had no darts, he had no targets. The Iker Machlokes is Korach and Dasan Aviram. So Vayikalu, they basically, even though they couldn't stand each other, but the one thing they had in common is they didn't like Moshe Rabbeinu. The 250 guys, they couldn't stand any of them. They didn't like Korach. They held he was wrong, and they held Dasan Aviram was wrong. They wanted to be Kohanim. Either they wanted the Kuna to be given to Nasiim or to the B'chayrim. How did they get together? The answer is Al Moshe ve'al Aaron. The only thing they could agree on is they didn't like the rabbi. That's the one thing they could agree on. So you have 10 people, they come to the rabbi, I don't like the rabbi. This guy, the rabbi is giving too much musar. This guy, the rabbi is not giving enough musar. They hate each other's guts. The one thing they could agree on is the rabbi is wrong. But really, had there not been a rabbi, they would have been punching each other out. That's pshat Talmidei Chacham and Malbim Shalom Yisrael. Why? Because if not for rabbi, they would be hitting each other. Now they all get together. Now they have shalom. It's a new pshat I never thought of before.
The enemy of my enemy is my friend.
That's a
Yeah.
beautiful shot.
That's what the Malbim says. Okay, anyway.
That's a nation of the world hates the Jew.
What? Exactly, right?
Hungarians hate the Hungarians, the Polish hate the Russians, Russia hate the Polish, but they all hate the Jews together.
Midyon and Moav, right? They made Shalom.
The English hate the French. But the Jews, they all hate together.
Okay. And what's Moshe's reaction to all this? Vayishma Moshe, Vayipol al panav. Says Rashi. Now Moshe falls on his face. By the Chet HaEgo, he didn't fall on his face. By the Meraglim, he didn't fall on his face. By the Mesoinim, he didn't fall on his face. Why not?
The third.
Right. Rashi says, Nibnei HaMachlokas. Shekvar Zeh biyadam sirchoin revi. This was already the fourth stench. Chatoi ba'egel, vayichal Moshe. Moshe David. B'mesoinim, vayispal Moshe. B'meraglim, vayomer Moshe al Hashem. V'shamu Mitzrayim. Interesting. But he's getting a little weaker. Vayichal is like a real plead. The second time, he davened, but it's not mamish vayichal. The third time he just said,
Lost hope.
B'machloika shel Korach nisrashlu yadav. He weakened. Mashal leben melech. It's a mashal to the son of the king, Shesarach alaviv. Upiyas alav oyava, his friend persuaded the king. Pam, shtayim, v'shalosh. K'shesarach aviyas nisrashlu yidei ha'oyev. Hahu. Amar, an masay atshriach alamech. How many times can I bother the king? Shemalei kabel oiv mimeni. The shaila is, first of all, what's special about the fourth time? Like, what happens after the fourth time? But there's like a magic number? Ask the Brisker Rav in the Sefer Shaila Torah, Chilak Aleph, look in the second paragraph. Hine yesh la'ayin. Madua davka pam ravius. He brings down an interesting thing. The Rambam says like this. The Rambam in Hilchos Tshuva says, look at number 6. B'shat sheshoiklen avoynos adam. When Hashem weighs the person's sin with his merits, ein mechashvin olav tchilas avayin shechatabai. They don't count the first sin. That's why you always do tshuva after the first one, so it never counts, right? V'lo sheni, it doesn't count the second one. Elo mishlishi ve'elech, only 3 and on.
So 2 enemies can kill.
Im nimsu, taka, I never thought of that. Im nimsu, avoinoisav. If your avoinos mishlishi ve'elech meruban al zechuyos are more than the zechuyos, then oisin shnei avoinos mitztarfim v'don ois hakol. Then we bring back the first 2. V'im nimsu zechuyos of kinegen avoinoisav, asher me'avon shlishi ve'elech. If the zechuyos are equal to 3 and on, mavirin kol avonos rishon rishon. We start taking away the sins one by one. Lefisha hashlishi nechshav rishon. The third one is the first. Shekvar nimchul hashnayim. So now we could take away one. V'chein haravi harehu rishon, because the third one is nimchal. V'chein ad seifan. Basically, God can overlook for a yachid 2 sins, but 3 sins not if they're more than the mitzvahs. Bamedvar ma'murim b'yachid. That's only by an individual. Shenemar hein kol ela yifal kel pa'omim shalashim gavar. So 2 he could overlook, not 3. Aval hatzibur toilen lohen avoin rishoin usheni ushlishi. When it comes to tzibur, God could overlook 3. Shenemar al shloisha pisha yisrael, but v'yal arba lo yashivenu. Says the Brisker Rav, that's precisely why at the 4th time Moshe Rabbeinu said, we are in trouble. Hashem could only overlook 3, but not the 4th. I saw the Brisker Rav. That was very quite interesting to make that application of the Rambam. However, I happened to come across the Chidah, who argues vehemently with this Brisker Rav. Now the Chidah, in case you didn't know, came well before the Brisker Rav, right? But he mentions this possibility of the Brisker Rav, and he rejects it. And one of his questions is, Rashi brings a mashal. Now, a mashal helps you understand something. What exactly needs explanation here? Rashi had a kasha that Rashi is explaining that what happened after the first sin of the Egel, Moshe was Vayechal. The second sin, Vayispalo. The third sin, what happened? Vayomer Moshe el Hashem. And the fourth sin he couldn't overlook. What exactly is this mashal adding? Rashi says, it's a mashal to someone who's trying to help out the kid. After 1, 2, 3 times, what is this mashal adding? What elucidation is it giving us here? Usually a mashal is when you have a question, a mashal is giving insight. What insight is the mashal giving? The Chidah says, very interesting, he says, this is the Pnei David in Parshas Korach, Amay yitzrich mashal hazeh. What do you need a mashal for? It's obvious. The Efshar Loimar says a Chidah, if not for the mashal, you may have made a mistake. And you might have learned Rashi the way we just did. He doesn't quote the Grizz by name, but he offers that pshat. Why? Says the Chidah, because we don't apply the rule Maver Rishon Rishon. Why? Because the Egel, even though it was the Chet Rishon, we would never remove that sin because it's Avodah Zarah. And when you serve Avodah Zarah, it's Ki'u Kafar B'Kol HaTorah Kula. Right? It's like they violated all 613. That's why the Chidah himself writes on the Pasuk, what does Hashem tell Moshe Rabbeinu when Hashem's reporting about the Chet Egel? Hashem says, Saru Mahir Min Haderach. They veered off very quickly. What does that mean, very quickly? Because since Kol HaMoed Avodah Zarah Kafar B'Kol HaTorah Kula, they very quickly violated all 613. So it says that, by the way, I'll just tell you on that, Aaron says to Moshe Rabbeinu, Aaron says to Klal Yisrael to store them off, Chag LaHashem Machar. Chag LaHashem Machar. Tomorrow we're making the Egel, it's not a Chag LaHashem. So Remez, that Soim Haravi, Yeh LeBeis Yehuda, L'Sasainu, L'Simcha, L'Mayadim Tovim, Mar Yesh Machar La'achar Zman. So Remez, that L'Asulavish, Vasavatams will turn over. But it says the Chidah, you can't apply the rule of Hashem would forgive it. That's why Hashem brings the mashal. The mashal is a melech basar v'dam. Melech basar v'dam doesn't forgive the first sin. That's why Rashi brings a mashal, to indicate the pshat here is not that after the first sin Hashem overlooked it. Because a melech basar v'dam will not overlook it, so too the Rebbe will never overlook Avodah Zarah. The pshat is that Moshe, through his Vayechal, even though the Rebbe would never overlook such a thing, he got him to overlook it. The first time, the second time, these are sins that the Rebbe will never overlook. It's only because Vayichal Moshe, Vayispal Moshe, Vayomer Moshe. After he pushed himself in and he was mispala. Okay, last offering for today.
But you didn't, because you paid for the Egel in every door. Every Puron is part of the Egel. You just extended it. Extended credit.
Yeah, but at least, we're still around. As opposed to Harif Mimeni, right? Okay. Second day of creation. First day of creation, what does it say? Kitayv. Second day? No Kitayv. Third day? Twice. Why doesn't it say Kitayv on day 2? Well, Rashi says because it wasn't finished yet. It wasn't. Rashi says the Meleches Hamayim wasn't finished, and if the job is not finished, it's not good. Says the Bereshis Rabbah, Lama Inksev Asheni Kitayv. Rabbi Yochanan says because Gehenna was created on Monday. Rav Chanina Amar Shaboy Nivres Machlokes Shenemar B'Himavdu B'Mayim L'Mayim. God created separation on that day. Separation ain't good. Amar Rav Tavyomi, what do you mean Machlokes? Machlokes. Hashem had to separate the upper waters from the higher waters. If a machlokes, which is to help the world, ain't good, it's a machlokes, which is not good for the world. Alachas kama v'kama. So Rabbi Sai points out the Sefer Shaila Torah. We see from here that how terrible machlokes is. That even something which is needed to correct the world is a difficult thing. So he brings down a very beautiful thought. from the Sefer Imrei Avram Hagoin of Avram Engelard. He writes like that, like as follows. That's why on Monday, the Shiur Shal Yom is what? Shiur Mizmor Livnei Korach. Why? Because since Machlokes was created on Yom Beis, and that somehow was the first of all Machlokes, and we have to remind ourselves every Monday to be Mesakein this inyan of Korach. Shiur Mizmor. In other words, remember the day, remember what the first Machlokes caused, and watch out. But as the Malbim says, the Machlokes was not with Moshe Rabbeinu. The Machlokes was all of these Chevra, they had internal Machlokes. And in general, it goes even deeper than that. When a person makes Machlokes, it means not only can they not get along with people on their team, they have a hard time finding comfort with themselves. Rabbi say, Shalom Al Yisrael. Have a good Shabbos.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.